Okay, so welcome to our panel today on text mining the news, challenges and impacts. We've got a great group of speakers today. We have four super cool speakers. We're going to start with researcher perspectives. We have two research projects, and then we're going to move to a library perspective. We have our first research project will be presented by Zoe Xie, who's a PhD candidate in economics at George Washington University, and also senior policy analyst at the Regulatory Studies Center at George Washington University. She has expertise in using text as data and also in studying regulatory policy and its impacts. So that's the first project. And then we'll shift to our second project, which is by Boyan Lee and Professor Sehun Kim. Sehun is an assistant professor in finance at the University of Florida, and Boyan is a graduate research assistant also at the University of Florida in the Warrington School of Business. So we'll get these two great research perspectives, and then after the researcher presentations, we'll shift gears a bit and move to a presentation by Sean Forbes, who's the director of the Milt Harris Library at the Rotman School of Business, University of Toronto. So we have different perspectives on this question of text mining the news, challenges and impacts. My name is John Dillon, and I'm the product manager for TDM Studio at Clarivate. I've always been fascinated with text mining newspaper content. You know, if maybe you're like me, or maybe you're a lot faster at reading the newspaper than I am, but I can read maybe a few articles a day in the newspaper, and it always fascinated me that machines could read thousands, millions, hundreds of millions of newspaper articles much more quickly than I could. So I'm very grateful to our speakers and their expertise. And now I'm going to turn things over to our first presenter, Zoe Xie.
Yeah, so as John has mentioned, today I'm going to talk about how I use newspaper text as data in my economic research. So in my research, I apply economics to regulatory studies. My primary research interest is to study the effects of regulatory policy on the aggregate level of economic activity, economic growth, and innovation. Some of my research questions include: how does regulation affect industrial productivity and production? How do new sentiment and uncertainty about regulation affect economic activity? And how does regulation of new technologies affect innovation? I use text analysis of newspaper articles to answer many of those questions. Newspapers have been a widely used data source in economic research because it can go far back in time to track historical trends and also provides timely information given its high frequency of publication. A couple of years ago, I had a research idea. I wanted to track uncertainty around regulatory policy over time using newspaper data and analyze how it affects economic activity. I immediately encountered several challenges because I wanted to track the historical trend back to 1980s. I needed a large amount of clean text data, which means millions of articles from multiple newspapers. However, the data obtained through conventional approaches like web scraping or manual downloading are not really clean and structured. For example, the computer would not recognize what the article title is and which text indicates the author name. Also, since the data size is very large storage space and the computing capacity were required. So what I found to address those issues was ProQuest TDM Studio. The TDM Studio provides direct access to all the ProQuest content my university has subscribed to, including thousands of current and historical newspapers. All the content is in machine-readable format, which means that the body text and the metadata of news articles can be extracted within a few minutes. Since TDM Studio provides cloud-based computing, I did all my analysis, all the text analysis in the studio, so I didn't need to secure any personal storage space. And here are just a few screenshots of my TDM Studio. News articles in the studio are stored as XML files, which is a type of structured text files. It's really easy to extract information from an XML file using Python or R code. Here I have about 800,000 news articles. I extracted the metadata for those articles, such as the article title, publication date, publishing newspaper, as well as the full text of the article. So next, I'm going to just talk about 3 examples to illustrate how I used newspaper text as data in my research. We know that COVID-19 affected everyone's life during the past few years. Responses to the pandemic in the US include various government regulations, such as travel restrictions and the emergency use authorization of certain medical products. And those regulatory responses, along with the coronavirus, were widely discussed in the news. So in this project, I wanted to know what people were saying about regulation at the time of the coronavirus outbreak, and what regulatory issues drew the most discussion. So I conducted this study using over 3,000 news articles that mention the terms related to COVID-19 and the regulation. Those articles are from 8 major US news sources published between January 3rd and April 17th, 2020. We can first look at the article frequency during that period. The yellow line in this graph shows the number of articles that mention terms related to COVID-19. Unsurprisingly, it has increased substantially since mid-February 2020. Among those articles, there is a subset of articles that also mention terms related to regulation. So as shown by the navy line in this graph, the number of those articles also had a big increase starting March. Then I further investigated the content of those articles using a text analysis technique called topic modeling. It identified 16 topics present in those 3,000 news articles that mention COVID-19 and the regulation. And this graph shows the word cloud for each topic. From the keywords for each topic, we can see that the topics are quite distinct from each other. The most prevalent topic discussed in those news articles in the news articles analyzed in this project is topic 1, primarily related to quarantine and reopening. Many articles also talk about topic 11 on testing and treatment, topic 5 on residency and community, and also topic 6 on medical devices. And those topics generally align with our intuition, and they also helped us identify the regulatory issues the public was most concerned with during that period. Some scholars criticize that regulation created barriers in the responses to COVID-19. And in this project, in the second example, I examined whether those criticisms reflect public opinion toward regulation and how average news sentiment evolved with the spread of COVID-19. To answer those questions, I conducted dictionary-based sentiment analysis for the same set of articles to see whether those articles expressed a positive or negative tone. And we can look at 2 examples of news sections here. In the first section contains positive words like strong and safeguard, but no negative words as defined in the dictionary. So it has an average positive sentiment. The second section includes only negative words, so it has an average negative sentiment. And after assessing the sentiment of each news article, we can analyze how the average news sentiment changed over time. And this graph shows the daily average sentiment score of the articles related to COVID-19 and the regulation. Interestingly, the overall trend suggests that the news sentiment was negative in most days during the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak, but started to improve in mid-March. The improvement in sentiment may suggest increased public confidence in regulatory responses as the government started to take the virus more seriously beginning March. And the third example is part of my long-term project in which I measure news sentiment and uncertainty about regulation over a much longer time period and analyze how sentiment and uncertainty about regulation affect macroeconomic outcomes. The data I use in this study are also much larger, covering over 600,000 news articles related to regulation from 7 major US newspapers. And the time frame covers from January 1985 through December 2021. I used sentiment analysis method to assess the level of uncertainty expressed in news content in this study. And similar to approach in the last example, I used a predefined dictionary to assess regulatory uncertainty in the relevant news content. And then in this section here, the words highlighted in the golden color are all uncertainty words as defined in the dictionary, indicating that this new section expressed a high level of uncertainty about federal regulations on new drug approvals. And using estimated uncertainty scores of relevant news articles and regression analysis, I then built a monthly regulatory uncertainty index to show the changes in regulatory uncertainty over time. A visual inspection of the index tells us that there are more spikes in regulatory uncertainty during recent years. And those spikes generally coincide with important historical events related to regulation, such as the passage of the Dodd-Frank Act in 2010, the 2016 presidential election, and the coronavirus outbreak in the US. And in my study, I further used this index to analyze how regulatory uncertainty affects economic outcomes. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zoe. Wow, super interesting. The uncertainty stuff is so cool. So thank you so much again, Zoe, for the really interesting presentation, multiple different studies covered. I'm now going to pass things over to Sehun. Over to you.
So thank you, John, for including us in the session. This is a teaser of a project that my colleague Joel Houston and our PhD student Boyan Lee and myself, all at the University of Florida, have been working on. The tentative title is 130 Years of ESG, which would naturally raise the question amongst the audience, well, has ESG been even around for 130 years? And in this project, we're going to try to tell you that it actually has been, just in different guises throughout history. And our main research question basically is, well, why has public concerns or interest in ESG, and how has that interest evolved over time? And what kind of consequences does that ebb and flow have on corporations? Okay, so to motivate the project in the context of the session, we're in the midst, as we all know, of the rise of large language models and big text data. Okay? And the combination of these two things enormously augments our ability to understand context in complex, evolving, and potentially societally important problems. Okay, and this presents a really new opportunity for researchers to try to tackle problems that we couldn't before. And one particular question that we're trying to answer using these two tools is how public attention and discourse about sustainability, environmental and social issues in business has evolved, and what can we learn from a historical perspective. And you'll see that LLMs and big text data will become really instrumental in doing the study. Okay, so what we do is we apply a large language model, specifically a word-to-vec model, which is a word embeddings approach to relate different words in the corpus contingent on how they're used together in proximity and frequency, to historical newspaper articles from the Wall Street Journal and New York Times, dating all the way back to the late 19th century. And so we have 130 years of newspaper articles. And instrumental to our study has been help by ProQuest TDM Studio, which provides access to digitized archival data of these news articles, as well as cloud computing capabilities, like Zoe was also talking about in her research. So the key in our research is to actually allow the context of environmental and social issues that the public is interested in to evolve and change over time. And to do that, what we do is we train a Word2Vec model that encapsulates the relationship between words in the corpus separately for different time periods. To be more precise, one for each decade. But at the same time, we also want to discipline the study by ensuring that we're looking at some universal concept of what we can view as environmental and social issues. So to that end, we're going to start with a universal or time invariant set of seed words related to the environment and social issues, such as pollution, inequality, and discrimination, and etc., which can be unambiguously understood as being related to these kinds of issues. And we feed the same seed words to the different time-specific Word2Vec models, which would then span time-specific dictionaries related to ESG issues. Okay? And then finally, we use this evolving dictionary to measure public attention to ESG issues in business by looking at business or economy-related news articles. And for each news article, we're going to compute the fraction of ESG-relevant word or n-gram counts, right, as a ratio to their total word count. And we're going to average those article-level ratios to monthly frequency. And there we will have a whole time series at monthly frequency going back to the late 19th century that encapsulates fluctuations in public interest in these sorts of ESG issues. So just to give you an example, focusing on the seed word pollution, if we look at the first decade in our sample, you can see that the top words that come out of this dictionary are going to be mainly related to water pollution, sewage, okay? Whereas in the most recent decade, you can see, even though these keywords are coming from the same seed word pollution, now they're more heavily weighted toward things like climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, air pollution, the Environmental Protection Agency in the US, and so forth. So you can see how our approach is allowing the context related to pollution evolve over time as the public sees it, okay? Okay, so this is basically the measure that we're going to devise using this algorithm. And you can see that we have a very long, high-frequency ESG index, so to speak, that goes back to 1890. And now we can start to relate this index to many different macroeconomic variables. So for example, what kind of pops out here, first of all, is that surprisingly, even before 1970, right, before the Milton Friedman Doctrine, before the EPA was established in the US, even before that, in the early 1900s, there was still a lot of interest among the public when it comes to social issues. Okay? And it seems like there was elevated interest during times of internal economic strife, as you can see that the level of the ESG index was higher during times when there were more frequent recessions, as indicated by the National Bureau of Economic Research. Okay? So for example, if you focus on the 1930s, which was the period of the Great Depression, there was a lot of interest in social issues while there was very high employment. Okay? It's more so during times of internal economic strife than times of, for example, external conflict, indicated by heightened geopolitical risk. Now, our measure also seems to do a very good job toward the more recent period in capturing elements related to, for example, climate policy uncertainty. So it's kind of capturing what it's supposed to be capturing, right? You would expect that in the more recent decades, this measure would be picking up more of climate change related concerns. Okay. But in the very long run, also intuitively, you can see that our measure correlates broadly together with measures of economic inequality, such as income inequality and wealth inequality, and also with political polarization to some extent as well. Now, how can we use this index? Well, it can be applied to many different settings, but as a team, we're all financial economists, so we're interested in companies and corporations and asset prices. And so what we're going to do is use this time series measure to learn something about the cross-section of companies and assets. And what we're doing here is we're looking at the profitability of a strategy taken on by an investor who's going to buy an asset that co-moves positively. It does better when the public is more interested in these kinds of ESG issues, okay? While shorting assets that do worse when the public is more interested in ESG issues. And we're looking at the cumulative profitability of the strategy over the course of history, assuming that the investor rebalances every month. Okay? And what you can see is that after 1980 or so, when we entered a long period of economic prosperity, this is when ESG assets started to really pay off. And what's really interesting is around 2000, there's almost like a substitution effect where the premium given to S beta assets, positive S beta assets, is sort of migrating toward positive E beta assets. So the premium that investors place on socially conscious assets are now migrating to environmentally conscious assets. Now, extending this idea, we can ask several following questions, such as, which firms are these throughout history that co-moved positively and negatively to public concerns about ESG? Which industries do they belong to, and which industries have they belonged to in the past? And how do these companies respond to changes in attention to ESG? Okay, so this big text data and large language model approach enables us to ask this question in a much broader and richer historical context that hasn't been possible before, because when people think about ESG, it's a very recent phenomenon. But if we take a broader approach and really delve into the data, text data specifically, we can learn that this is not really a new issue, but it has always been there, but in different guises. Okay, so to conclude, the combination of big text data from historical newspapers and large language models leads to a very powerful and versatile machinery that can help garner new historical and economic insights. But there's a caveat to this, and the caveat, well, I say caveat, but it's really a desperate call for help as an academic, is that access to this digitized historical news data, as well as the application of LLMs to this data, are both very costly. Okay? However, as costly as they are for academic researchers, these tools are increasingly becoming the norm, the name of the game. And so it's really important for librarians to be able to support us. And I do think that librarians can play an essential role here by generating, aggregating, and promoting interest in these data and tools so that universities and institutions can readily fund them. Okay, so thank you very much, and I'll pass the baton back to John.
Thanks so much. Wow, it's amazing. Thank you, Sehun, Boyan, and Joel. Incredible research, just incredible. The length of time covered is amazing. Over to you, Sean, for the last part of our panel, looking at a library perspective. Over to you, Sean.
All right, well, after hearing from our colleagues about their terrific projects, I will be talking about how the University of Toronto Library set ourselves up to be a partner with our faculty and students to make their experience using TDM Studio in particular as painless as possible. On signing on with TDM Studio in May of 2021, UTL began to work on introducing the product to its research community. This rollout and communication included many different avenues and methods of outreach. Introductory emails to faculty members and PhD students at Rotman who had expressed interest in TDM over the years, which included a list of sources available in TDM Studio, were sent out. Being embedded within the business faculty allowed for the leveraging of existing relationships, which provided a huge advantage when reaching out more broadly to other faculty as well. This rollout was happening during the pandemic, so some of the normal lines of outreach, such as meetings on site or informally in the coffee line, the business libraries embedded in the management school, couldn't happen until we were back in person. For this reason, it was best thought to highlight TDM Studio in the Milt Harris Library reopening plans in hopes that such an important document would likely be read. It's very important to work closely with the vendor, and initially webinars for U of T faculty and librarians were offered by ProQuest. These provided an introduction to the platform that will highlight what researchers can do with TDM Studio, as well as find out how researchers can request access and find help. An email was sent out to Rotman faculty, letting them know of their webinars, and a note on the UTL library listserv alerted librarians all three U of T campuses. A link to the recording of the webinar was shared afterwards for those who could not attend but had interest, and by the economics liaison librarian to their faculty as well. ProQuest also provided links to extensive resources on their TDM Studio page and their LibGuide. With continuing help from the ProQuest team providing a great deal of support for new users to get their projects up and running, a more general rollout to the broader university community seemed like a natural next step. The Map and Data Library was an obvious partner to loop in, and so was contacted early in the marketing process. An information page was created on their website under the large umbrella page of technology/text and data mining, which provided an overview of the library's major TDM platforms and collections. This page gradually expanded to serve as a complete getting started guide for both visualizations and Workbench, providing a walkthrough and screenshots of processes such as creating an account, building a data set, and exporting results. The Map and Data Library became a resource point for TDM Studio as well as the go-to referral for more in-depth consultations at UTL on this tool. A dedicated team at UTL was assigned to work with ProQuest as a conduit to make the introduction to the university seamless and help with continuing conversations and updates. More successful internal promotion of the new resource. In addition to the vendor webinars, librarians across UTL's 3 campuses were made aware of the new tool via existing internal listservs, such as new e-resources, as well as through staff webinars and training sessions, such as a TDM tasting menu workshop. Success users became word-of-mouth recommenders for colleagues for their research, providing for additional future growth of the tool and its user base. Like other academic institutions, the University of Toronto Library have been developing services and supports for research related to text and data mining collections, tools, and techniques. Providing awareness of what the library has to offer is a fundamental first step and is handled through an existing network of listservs, webinars, working and interest groups, and other training opportunities for library staff and faculty, as I've just mentioned previously. Equally important, however, is the ability of the library to support new users once they've discovered a tool and have decided to incorporate it into their own teaching and learning. Tutorials on library resources are developed and maintained by library staff. In addition to facilitating discovery, these provide an entry point or getting started guide, as well as links to additional resources. They're grouped together thematically and co-advertised across various departmental offerings. The Map and Data Library, for example, employs graduate student library assistants to work through tutorials on a regular basis to ensure accuracy and update screenshots. This page also serves as the basis for a more in-depth workshop on TDM Studio Workbench, which is offered once a semester and accessible at any time via a recording. For scholars interested in text mining, but who lack the technical expertise to explore these techniques, UTL also offers foundational tutorials, workshops, and self-paced Quirkus courses on related skill sets. Libraries should be at the forefront of training in these areas. Support of the programming languages required for use in TDM Studio Workbench, R and Python, has also contributed to lowering the barrier for use of the tools themselves. If a researcher requires additional support, this can be provided via email or through in-person or Zoom consultations. Consultation workflows are well established at UTL, so nothing was required to include TDM Studio once broader awareness of that the Map and Data Library was able to offer support on this tool was established. These consults range from discovery interviews where a researcher has a project in mind, but it is unsure about the collections, methods, and technical skills required to bring the idea to life, to specific questions related to tweaking code for established workflows. These meetings have proven helpful, not only in ensuring the continued use of the platform, but in aiding to improve the platform for future use. Finally, the role that UTL has played in supporting new text mining tools such as TDM Studio has led to greater connectivity with the broader academic community in Canada and beyond. Librarians and other institutions who are facing similar questions have approached UTL via listservs and through direct emails, often after having discovered the library's online tutorial pages. Virtual meetings with individual institutions and larger consortia have resulted in increased regional and national expertise. These meetings also culminated in a successful inaugural colloquium on TDM and libraries, which was held at U of T in May of 2023. This colloquium provided a North American forum for librarians and others working within libraries to discuss TDM as a growth area in academia and how libraries can help to support this network. There were presentations from librarians, researchers, and vendors involved in TDM, along with opportunities to discuss ideas, challenges, opportunities, and build community. The event culminated in the launch of a new listserv dedicated to supporting librarians moving forward. Finally, as interest in TDM grows within academic institutions, libraries are increasingly called on to support this type of research across diverse disciplines, as we're hearing this today. To do so, librarians must keep aware of changes within the landscape, and in particular, the suite of tools available to license and the support of text mining. The development of a workflow with defined pathways for investigation, licensing, outreach, and ongoing support of these tools is key to their success. While the speed of change and breadth of resources can be overwhelming at times, leveraging existing networks within the library system and wider community ensures that opportunities are not missed and that limited resources of time and money are well spent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean. Wow, it's amazing to hear about all of the different intricacies of sort of the library infrastructure that's necessary for supporting this type of research, for collaborating with researchers, for connecting with the researchers. Really amazing, eye-opening to me as well. So thank you so much, Sean, again. So thank you all again for your presentations. Really amazing presentations. Seeing all the work develop, it's incredible. The research and the support in the library, all of the different pieces that it takes to connect all of the data, and I just want to hear more about it from you all. So thank you so much for these presentations. We appreciate it a lot. And if folks have questions, we're happy to take questions now.